Hey everybody, I'm David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT and this here podcast, Next TMT Talks, with my co-founder Daniel Frankel, talking all things technology, media, and telecom. This week, Comcast may be gunning for Warner Brothers Discovery, but it's still losing cable subscribers. That said, Dan sees some signs that the cable business may be turning a corner. What he didn't see was enough sports on the weekend, thanks to the YouTube TV blackout of Disney properties, which continues to intrigue. Adobe Max had the promise of new AI tools, new AI filmmakers, old Hollywood filmmakers, and new creative talents challenged to figure out what their careers will look like amid AI's transformations. Speaking of old school, new school, I chatted with Richard Linklater on Nouvelle Vague, his loving Netflix homage to the French New Wave of the 1950s and 60s, and especially director Jean-Luc Godard, part of the streaming giant's dozen or so awards contenders. Speaking of Netflix, it may be taking a run at the Warner Brothers carcass as well. It has anteed up the NDAs to take a peek at the finances, and that may include the streaming operations, which puzzles me, but Dan and I will kick that around. Paramount Skydance gets unfortunately skinnier, while Barry Weiss tries to raid the Fox News locker for some talent and loses one of its biggest rainmakers in the process. And finally, Nvidia tops $5 trillion in market cap. Apple tops $4 trillion. I have to say, it's a good time to be a hyperscaler. So, Dan, what caught your eye this week?
You're an NBA fan. I'm an NBA fan. The big story last year was the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers. And to this day, the general manager gets booed at games in Dallas for doing
Fire
that.
Nico. Fire Nico. That's the chant, right?
So if you're David Ellison and you take over a movie studio, I mean, you see Taylor Sheridan with his boots and his hat, whatever he wants. I mean, the guy, I don't always agree with him. Some of his soliloquies rub me the wrong way, but I think he is probably one of the most vital producer talents working in video today. How did that go south? I mean,
Right.
I'd like to know more.
And to be clear, he's leaving in 2029, in 3 years. He will wrap up all the business he got going on, and it's a lot of business. Landman, which we both enjoyed watching, my spouse adores, but as you rightly point out, seems to really have a soft spot in its heart for big oil.
It's still entertaining.
Landman,
It's sticky.
Season 2 coming right back in about 2 weeks, alongside some other stuff. He keeps pumping these puppies out. Now he'll be pumping them out for Donna Langley, who has become, I have to say, the essential care and feeding zookeeper in Hollywood for talent that wants to go somewhere and make stuff. I mean, she's really bringing him in, and he is the latest example. But you're right. How do you let him go? Now, you had heard some things that I had not about Ellison pushing, seemingly, you would think that he would be sort of already friendly to MAGA entreaties, but he's a pretty...
You a New York Post reader, David?
What?
It was in the New York Post and several other outlets that political concerns came in. I guess Ellison, who is described as a Trump supporter of the New York Post, was pushing him to be more with the program, I guess. And Sheridan sees himself as apolitical. His content is apolitical.
Yeah, or his politics, really. I mean, it's very much him. Yeah.
Cole Hauser does, meat industry testimonials in Yellowstone. So it surprised me a little bit, but like I said, that move in general surprised me. So
there were some weird things, like I think that they thought it was good to send a whole bunch of people to go try and palaver with Sheridan about re-upping, and he would have preferred a couple of people, not getting overwhelmed by a retinue, for instance. I mean, he's a man who goes his own way and has done well enough. I got to say, if we were creating a list of the, top 5 biggest TV showrunners out there these days, he'd be definitely on the list. Shonda Rhimes, not David Wolf, the guys behind CSI, Ryan Murphy. It's just a few people, and he's definitely one of the ones you gotta grab, right, if you can, and keep if you can. So that was a big whiff on Ellison's part, even as they were laying off part of a expected 2,000 people, something like 20% of the entire Paramount Skydance.
Yeah, and they just laid off the three-headed Hydra management group over the spring, laid off 800 people.
Right.
I mean, I get that MTV and Nickelodeon and BET, I don't know how much those assets are assets anymore. I mean, and maybe you can't build a staff around them anymore, but
Can't build a big staff. I mean, it's interesting because he has supposedly said he wants to keep his cable operations and do something with them.
yeah.
It was definitely a conversation this week in some of the things that I was taking part in about, what does MTV look like now? I'll tell you what it looks like now. It's YouTube. You go and dial in. I want to listen to chill music from the 90s, or I want hip hop from the 2010s, and boom, you've got a playlist. Or I'm really looking forward to all the songs by Taylor Swift or whomever. Bang, you got that. MTV should be my music TV, not any random programmer's music TV. How you get around that with an old school linear channel is incomprehensible to me. But again, I'm not that smart.
Well, it is a brand of some recognition. Somebody smart could apply it to something that's not a basic cable channel and probably make some hay.
Maybe.
So I'm just surprised that it's still seen as that.
Yeah, I look at that and I think of Vivo or Stingray. That's what I think of. Those are actual functioning things that have had very close relationships with the labels and run lots and lots of stuff in a really smart way. Music video, you don't have to sit around and wait for Headbangers Ball at midnight to get your fill of heavy metal. I know you are absolutely a heavy metal guy, between Robbie Krieger of The Doors and whatever's left of Black Sabbath. So totally.
I did watch a little Headbangers Ball. I worked at Tower Records, and we
of course you did.
I kicked it afterwards, and they had a good alternative music show on Sunday nights that we'd watch. And before that, there was just the videos, and my brother and I would watch and argue about music for hours. But like nobody, I'm past the age where brand marketing really matters. It's probably an older brand. Whoever comes up with anything is probably targeting older consumers. But it seems like somebody should buy it and make something out of that. So anyway, that's just my thought.
Well, but Ellison is making a run at Warner Brothers Discovery, as supposedly some others are, and he wants the whole thing. He's tried this bear hug 3 times and it hasn't paid off, but that includes et cetera, and I guess he'd just have more cable to play with and revive or something. I'm not sure what it would be. I did watch some ACC football on.
Before we get to that, I was kind of outside looking in, going, why, after weeks of saying they have no interest in Warner Brothers, Netflix, why would they turn around and sign an NDA for a bank to kick the tires on it? And it's an opportunity to get a lot of information. I mean, this is, you may not want to buy it, but you want to know what's behind the hood.
Sure. Phishing is useful, even if you're not going to disclose it. It's like, okay, so I'm not going to tell the New York Times, but I'm certainly going to know what you're making and what your deals are with all the cable providers out there, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, that's kind of useful. That's a time-honored trick. And so we'll see what happens. I got to think Zaslav is desperate to do anything to jack up the price by increasing the bidders. Comcast clearly one that's serious about buying the whole thing. So, you can throw the cable stuff into Versant, et cetera, et cetera. But
did you read Craig Moffat's note on that?
I did, yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about it.
Well, I got the feeling that nobody sees it from a regulatory perspective as very possible.
Right. It's like, how are you going to get this thing through? It's like magic? Or what's going to happen? And I think that's a reasonable question for any thinking person. But, if you did, maybe you do a joint deal with Apple or somebody that Trump likes, and that provides some cover to get things done, maybe. But that being said, did you see
the list for the remodel, the White House remodel? It was like a dozen outlets had it. I chose the Apple Insider link, but that's interesting. Kowtowing seems to be working for it.
Well, I think the best thing Apple can do is create an Apple Vision Pro walkthrough of what the East Wing used to look like.
That's a good idea.
Before it got torn down, and that'll be sort of an homage, and what the Rose Garden used to look like before Melania went to town on it. And that'll be sort of like historical, So it is fair to say these things have evolved quite a bit over the years.
Speaking of evolution, I remember early May we were sitting in the same channel and we were talking about Apple's logistical nightmare. I mean, were they going to make iPhones? Oh no. Tim Cook's really roasted this time. And here we are 6 months later, I mean, they didn't meet expectations, but they still made a boatload in the third quarter off the iPhone 17. Looks like
Yeah, they
it's going
missed by a little bit, but not by a lot. Tim
to
Cook
mark.
is the Brer Rabbit of CEOs. Man, you think he's in trouble, and the fox and the bear are going to get him, and he's
Right.
just saying, "Please don't throw me in the briar patch," and they throw him in the briar patch, and he just says, "This is where I was born," and he just bounds off free. It's kind of like that.
So Apple's market cap is back up to 4 trillion.
Well, this was a record. It had never been above 4 trillion before. This was a record this week. It topped 4 trillion as Nvidia topped 5 trillion 11 weeks after topping 4. Nobody else is in the game. Microsoft is a little behind Apple, but man, it is so much bigger than everybody else. It's nuts.
Yeah, Jensen Huang was at the company does a GPU tech conference in Washington. Did it last week, and he was saying it
feels like he does something about every 3 weeks. I mean, Jensen's doing something. Like, we're having a big conference and talking to all our users in this place and this place and this place, and it's going to be great. And we're going to there's another $100 billion deal we're doing, and every 3 weeks.
It was exciting. The next phase of accelerated computing and AI, or next phase of the bubble. Really, man, what an inspiring man.
He is a very engaging guy. You listen to him talk. He feels like he's a very pleasant human being, and you couldn't imagine him actually being one, given the job he has to do and the things that he's done to get to where he's gotten. He seems like a very pleasant guy, also brilliant and gazillionaire. But he built that company from nothing. Got into gaming GPUs back in the day, to speed up your Doom game and things like that.
They had some streaming gadgets for a while.
And then they got into crypto, and that was really a good thing, but not anything like what AI has been. I mean, it's like orders of magnitude difference. Speaking of companies that have really dived into this whole AI universe, I spent a couple of mornings, actually most of Wednesday, at the Adobe Max user conference here in Los Angeles. Heard all the ways that this is really interesting to me. So they are partnering with a good half a dozen large language model providers and maybe 20 different models built into their own, alongside their own Firefly AI. And you can either subscribe directly to Firefly, and their pitch is you subscribe to us and you'll have access to everybody else. You don't need to have like a dozen subscriptions for AI, which is a pretty good deal, really. And then they ended up becoming, to me, a little bit like what Amazon is with Amazon channels. You just go to Amazon, subscribe to the channels you want, pay through them, one bill. Isn't it beautiful? Really interesting sort of play, I thought.
Did they take my idea to be an AI super aggregator already?
As with so many other things in AI, there's nothing original here, Dan.
Yeah.
But it's how you execute it. We should not, least of all us, feel like, oh, that's our idea, because it's never happened before. But, it was interesting. They had to say, James Gunn, Day 2 keynote typically features some interesting people. A couple of years ago, I went to the one in Las Vegas where they announced Firefly, and they had like the head of Lisa Su from AMD, the big competitor to Nvidia.
I don't know if you saw that. We got that entire James Gunn interview in the issue.
Yeah. So we've got the Gunn interview, but Gunn was up there and a couple of really big YouTube creators who each have billions of views. But Gunn was interesting because he didn't say a single thing about Warner Brothers. He wasn't asked a single thing, I should clarify, about what was going to happen to Warner Brothers, where he has this cool gig co-overseeing the DC studios, which is Superman, Batman, etc., and all their ways that they want to exploit those franchises. He talked about just being a shiftless 19-year-old trying to figure out what he was good at that he also liked doing. And eventually he got frustrated, was going to quit it all, going to go be a lawyer. And his dad, a lawyer, as are his uncles and his grandfather, said, "Son, I love being a lawyer. I love fine print. I love documents. You do not. Do not be a lawyer. Go find something you're good at that you love." And off he went and wrote a screenplay for Tromeo and Juliet, sold it for $150 to Troma Studios, and spent a good long run at Troma, and then he wrote Guardians of the Galaxy, which worked out to the tune of about $700 million in worldwide box office, which is a lot more than all the Troma films in the history of Troma have made collectively. So
here I am trying to push my son into law school, and you're saying he can enjoy his life and not Just
Well,
Monday,
you can
Friday,
go be
Monday.
a lawyer. This is not a great time in the AI universe to be a lawyer, particularly a starting lawyer. All that scut work that starting lawyers get stuck doing all the research and all that, that's going to get AI out of existence. So that's a big problem for all the law firms out there that depend on billable hours and the volume of billable hours of all their associates who they work into the ground. They're just going to
Right.
boop, AI it, or maybe their client goes boop, AI it, and a little more booping going on. But I mean, it's going to impact them. So anyhow, speaking of Netflix, which had a pretty good quarter, but not great because of that little Brazilian thing we talked about last week. This week I was at the American French Film Festival for Richard Linklater's, the debut of Richard Linklater's, one of his 2 awards contenders, Nouvelle Vague, a loving thank you note, is the way he put it, to the directors of the French New Wave, the Nouvelle Vague, from the late 1950s and early 60s, and particularly Jean-Luc Godard. The film follows Godard in the sort of shambolic process he pursued in making an extraordinary film, Breathless, which I saw in college and remained in love with ever since, featuring Jean-Paul Belmondo and Gene Seberg, a lovely young American ingenue who was very skeptical of Godard's process, shall we say. But it's a great one. And one of the things that was so cool, he puts a lower third identifying, Francois Truffaut, Claude Chabrol, Robert Bresson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all these different people who were part of this extraordinary wave of filmmakers who came up in the very end of the 1950s and the early 60s. 64 of them had their debut movie in about a 3-year period in France. That's an extraordinary number. They don't even make 164 films in Hollywood these days. And, a lot of them were just incredible films, like Shoot the Piano Player and 400 Blows and on and on and on. And his film is just delightful. It's shot in black and white. It looks like a film of the era. He said he wanted it to look like not a story about the era, but a film from the era. And he named Jacques Rosier, a lesser-known filmmaker of the era. He wanted to keep it in his head as like, it's really a film by Jacques Rosier about the making of this film. And pretty cool. But it's one of about 10 or 12 films that have some kind of awards potential for Netflix. One of the big ones, I think, is going to be this song Golden from K-Pop Demon Hunters, the most popular film now in Netflix history. They're going to push that for best song, and I got to think it's going to have a shot because every parent in the Academy will have heard that song 457 million times. It will be grooved into their brains, whether they like it or not, and they will be forced by their children to vote for it. So I think it's got a shot. So I'll throw that up there. I don't know what Nouvelle Vague will do. Maybe screenwriting. He's been nominated 5 other times for Oscars and is much loved. He has a second film that Netflix is also going to be doing called Blue Moon, about the guy, Lorenz Hart, who wrote songs like My Funny Valentine. But that's a little bit less fun. This is a fun film.
Lots of fun.
Yeah. So.
Okay. What else is going on? Oh, yeah, I can talk about cable now.
Yeah, talk about cable.
We've talked a lot about fixed wireless access and FWA, as it's known, and its infiltration into a space previously dominated by cable companies. At one point, 2020, the pandemic era, when we were Zooming a lot and needed the internet quite a bit, cable controlled over 70% at one point of American broadband. And this is for big companies like Comcast. It's not television so much as providing your internet, which is their core business. And it was just a slight little flattening of the arc, but for the first time in quite a while, 5 years, you could see sort of that deceleration of the steep arc of slop, just declining customer metrics, losing customers every quarter. They still lost, I think, 109 in the third quarter. Comcast did. Charter lost, that's right neck and neck with Comcast. Lost about the same amount. But they're not losing, is the growth of losses is great. And what's happening is they're developing better products, faster internet, merchandising them better. At the same time,
really merchandising them, Dan, really merchandising them at all. I mean, you point out Charter's now got it back in the rotation for its promos, and I see them all the time on Charter because I'm a Charter subscriber. But there was a good long run there where we don't do cable. What are you talking about? We don't. We got these other things like wireless and stuff and broadband and stuff, but cable TV, who does that? It was like, this is the thing you guys started out doing. It was kind of fun.
Right. So So Verizon has saw its rate of acceleration for fixed wireless access decline a little bit. You're just seeing some green shoots in the marketplace for cable. It's nothing big yet, but that's where their stock prices kind of live. Separate from that, it was interesting that Charter actually lost more broadband customers than video customers. Its strategy of packaging the major SVODs in the primary pay TV bundle continues to pay off. They could actually start adding customers again in video. Video's in their primary service bundle again. They advertise it. It's important to them again. And this all stemmed from a blackout 3 years ago or 2 years ago.
Standoff. This was a serious standoff. This was like an oh my God standoff. Yeah.
At the beginning of the football season, Disney channels went off of Charter. And it was for 2 weeks, they remained. And if you're a YouTube TV subscriber, there's about 10 million of us now. You missed a lot of games. So it forced
the one 2 years ago was Chris Winfrey saying, "We don't need this. We don't need your shows. We need some accommodations here, you know." And he didn't blink. And now,
right, they just wanted a little innovation in terms of how things were packaged. They saw more content leaking off the cable channels onto the streaming services and said, "Why don't we just bundle those?" Disney said yes. Ultimately, the other media companies said yes, and
I mean, once Disney went there, everybody else fell like dominoes. It was like that was the new paradigm 2 years ago. But now YouTube, right? 10 million subs, it's getting toward Charter Comcast size in terms of its market weight, and it has a little $3.5 trillion company behind it, which doesn't hurt. Like, you want us to bleed out? We're not going to bleed out, right? We can outweigh you guys.
Right. I think I said YouTube, but it was a Charter. This time it's YouTube. It's going to war with Disney. War. And they want kind of specific things. YouTube wants to take the content and put it onto its servers, ingest it, so that doesn't have to, if you bundle the new Disney DTC platform, you don't have to send folks to Disney and have them authenticate over at Disney. It wants to control the user experience. That's something that Disney's probably pushing back against. YouTube has, a massive parent company which just made $100 billion in a quarter for the first time. It's got 10 million subscribers. It's going to be the biggest pay TV operator within a 2-year time frame, or maybe less. So this one's kind of interesting. This could drag out a little while. It started on, I think it's Thursday or Friday night. I don't remember. And it's Sunday night. They've already missed an entire weekend of college football. If it drags on to past tomorrow night, they'll miss Monday Night Football, the beginning of the NCAA men's and women's college basketball season. This is big stuff.
Some good NBA games too. Yeah, I mean, all the sports stuff absolutely will be off the air, and probably Abbott Elementary. But beyond all that, this is interesting because you mentioned it in passing. Who owns the customer? Disney. Their lifeblood is that relationship with their customer that they then put through what Walt himself called the washing machine, which was this big set of interconnected things that fed one to the other, to the other, to the other, to the theme parks and the cruise ships and the books and the online presence and the games. He did. Yeah, he has a famous photo from like 1956, and he shows all these different things, so the pajamas and, on and on and on.
I guess this was before the flywheel. Before we developed the flywheel, there was the washing machine.
Yeah. It would go round and round, but Disney has been very clear since Walt himself about owning who that customer is and running them through all the different bits. And if you take them out of a crucial part of that and say, no, it's going to be owned by YouTube, that's a problem. So I could see that might be potentially a big deal.
Well, point of contention, I'm sure, is that it comes up in the negotiation. Disney owns Hulu plus Live TV, which is another virtual pay TV service that competes with YouTube TV. And now they just closed last week on Fubo, which is yet another virtual TV. So they have, between the two of them, they don't have quite the distribution that YouTube TV does, but it is a place to put content.
And Fubo is sports centric, shall we say? They
put their college football game day telecast, which is the kind of studio element of their coverage for the full day of college football Saturday, and that was from Bryce Eccles Stadium in Utah. They put that on X. They live streamed it. So a lot of alternatives to reach their their consumer that don't involve Google. So who knows? Could drag on for a while.
Yeah, it could drag on for a while because there's options, and that's always been the thing. Somebody didn't have options in these traditional things. Either you didn't have an option to put your football games on. I mean, that there was always some leverage point. Now the leverage points have all shifted, and I think that you're right. That is pretty interesting stuff. We'll see who's going to blink. One of the things that
sports on TV. But before you do that, I just want to ask, and it wasn't in our newsletter, but did you catch any of the World Series?
I had a few things going on this week and still managed to see, I think, about 40 hours of the games, roughly, because they kept going. And like,
we got a double on Monday night, yeah.
We got a double on Monday night, so I didn't feel so bad about missing the next two games because I was out at the festivals. I was moderating a panel on the 40th anniversary of Nightmare on Elm Street with Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself, longtime producer of the film, Sarah Risher, whose son, Nick, is the person who invited me to do this for the Dark Matter Film Festival, and the directors of 3 of the 7 films. And actually, that was delightful. That was better than watching a series of Dodger home runs die in the night air at Dodger Stadium about 3 feet
that was frustrating
of the fence. But it was a hell of a game, and they won. And I certainly watched last night and the game before that. So
I watched with a Toronto friend who, beyond being a little resentful about the Dodgers payroll, it was just really two great teams, great defense, hard fought.
Yeah. Evenly matched, lots of stars. Your Toronto friend who may feel aggrieved about the Dodgers payroll should realize that Toronto has the 5th largest payroll in baseball. So while he can be outraged about the Dodgers and their very clever financial maneuvering around particularly Shohei Ohtani's deal, which will pay him till 2049 or something, but only $2 million a year right now.
It's a lot of gambling until 2040.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just his assistant. It's just his assistant. So
it's definitely his assistant. Definitely.
Anyway, I didn't mean to sidetrack us. I just thought it was interesting. Denigrated Fox's college football coverage pretty badly a few weeks ago, but I thought their baseball broadcast and what Rob Manfred has done with the game, that pitch clock and just moving it along.
Those changes have paid off. I mean, I don't know if this catapults baseball back into some sort of primacy in American life. I don't think so, but it's definitely much more in the conversation. My spouse,
it's a strong postseason.
Yeah.
Even if my team wasn't in it,
yeah.
I'd have to say that was a strong postseason.
Yeah.
So. Anyway.
Speaking of postseasons, this is a bit of a stretch in terms of segues, but among the people I talked with at the Adobe Max Conference, waiting in line to go into day 2 keynote stuff outside what's now called the Peacock Theater at LA Live. It's been renamed again. At one point it was the Microsoft Theater, and it's had about a half a dozen sponsors over the last 20 years, but it's now the Peacock Theater. And waiting to go in, there were 5 students in front of me, and I noticed that one of them was from Pittsburgh State University, and realized they were all from there. And I am probably one of the few people from outside.
Is that the University of Pittsburgh? Or
no? I'm one of the few people from outside the state of Kansas who knows that Pittsburgh State is in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Oh. And there's no H on the end, but it's a nice little college town and nice little college. And they're all like, one wants to be a web designer, one wants to be a graphic designer. They're all doing stuff that uses Adobe apps. And there were like 18 of them there from the university for this thing to find jobs. Most of them were seniors. Lovely, very nice people. They had a really interesting point. When they started school 3.5 years ago, AI was not a question about what it would mean for their careers. Now, it's pretty much all they're thinking about because they're getting out in 6 months and they're like, I don't know what's going to be there when I get there. And that's a really interesting thing to think about.
I mean, in late 2023, we were on a consumer level. We were just starting to play around with ChatGPT.
Right. And not really doing much in the way of no video and just starting to do some text to image stuff, just starting to happen, But it was a pretty interesting conversation, just how they're trying to deal with that. Inside the building, a little bit later, I ran into an old friend, Michelle Slavich, who has been top communications executive for NBC Universal, Google, YouTube, Netflix, and Warner. Her gig now, after having left Netflix a little while ago, is with a company called Promise.ai. And Promise is backed by Google's AI Ventures Fund, A16Z, which is Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz's big venture capital firm backing a bunch of AI companies, the founders of Box and Frame.io, which Adobe now owns. And, it's kind of like, oh my God. So there's some serious money there, which is why Michelle's there, because she's not dumb. And she introduced me to a couple of filmmakers, Nem Perez and David Clark, I think is his name, who are using these tools to create hybrid production workflows that take AI tools, work them into traditional workflows. And they're teaching studios how to do this stuff. This is the accommodation that Hollywood will be making, is figuring out how to use this stuff, not to replace, but definitely to enhance, to speed up, to shorten some parts of the development cycle and the production cycle. And they're teaching them how to do that. And that's happening now. And they also bought Curious Refuge, a online school that has taught tens of thousands of students already in 150 countries how to use these AI tools to start making videos. So we are about to see the flood. Just saying.
We're about to see the flood. The flood isn't happening now?
Nope. I think the tide's rising, but it ain't over our heads yet, but it's coming. Just telling you.
So I know you paid attention to some earnings this week. I had this experience with Alphabet in the second quarter, and it was only accentuated last week when they reported third quarter earnings. I mean, this is a company that just 5 years ago was reporting for the third quarter $47 billion. It was a big deal. We were talking about how massive Alphabet had gotten, and now it's more than doubled that. It was $102 billion and change. Just AI has like nitrous oxided every aspect of that business.
Absolutely. And that was the one that everybody thought was going to be roadkill in the AI superhighway, right? Because everybody was going to go to ChatGPT, et cetera, to get their information instead of going to the Google information super complex. And in fact, what they're still doing is going to Google mostly and using Gemini.
It might be wrong,
right.
But Gemini, Google powered search is just across the verticals is providing
Google Gemini powered search now. It's not just Google search, but Google.
They have multiple chatbots across.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, YouTube which is also on a growth bender. Everything grows about 15-16% a quarter.
Right. Plus they have Waymo. I don't know if you got Waymo much in your neighborhood. Man, it is everywhere in Santa Monica.
It's here, in West Adams.
Yeah.
But you can't take it to the airport yet. I don't know if there's regulations or it's too complicated. Yeah.
So it's still geo fenced, but I noticed in some of my traipsing around the city, to Hollywood, to downtown, et cetera, that I was seeing Waymo cars in places that the old geo fencing areas that limited it really to the west side and west of the 405 seem like they have been extended considerably. So now that area has definitely grown. They're now in Austin. They're coming into New York. They've obviously been in San Francisco for a while. There's a lot going on there. That is looking like a real business. Tesla's trying to catch up. They're kind of giving away stuff in Austin.
Well, speaking of YouTube, they have all sorts of creator tools to help you refine your videos and target your audience and make stickier stuff. And on the other side, they've got search and recommendation stuff that help you find the stuff you want. So
one of the interesting little
a business that was already growing at a pretty healthy clip.
Right. Well, one of the interesting little announcements at Max was a deal between the newest software app, which is the iOS only so far, mobile app version of Premiere, their video editing software. And they just launched that 3-4 weeks ago. It's pretty cool. I got it. It's a free thing, or you can step up and start using the AI bits in much more sophisticated ways. But they did a deal with YouTube Shorts. So not only can you much more easily upload your shorts from Premiere Mobile up into YouTube Shorts, but they will pull down all the trending topics and formats and all that stuff from YouTube Shorts, so you can sit there and go, oh, I like that look, I'm going to remix that and play off of that, because that's a really good way to drive viewership. And that is knitting things together at a pretty high level between Adobe and YouTube that I find fascinating. I think that Tide's rising.
Yeah. What else? I think we're
So we
active
covered
week.
a lot of stuff. It's been quite a week. Like I said in the newsletter, it seemed like everybody woke up after, I don't know, Labor Day and said, "Oh my God, we got to get some stuff scheduled the last week of October because then the holidays will start." I mean, I've already seen my first Christmas ads.
Oh.
We got to get like a festival or a panel or a conference or all of the above scheduled for the last week of October while we can still get people to show up. And they all did. And I went to all of them. And now hopefully it'll be slightly quieter. We won't have earnings week. I think most of the earnings, I think the only one still to come is probably Nvidia among the big boys.
Well, the studios for the most part.
Who are these studios you speak of?
Disney,
Right, the
brothers, Paramount Skydance.
Right, yeah, those guys. I mean, Warner Brothers Discovery stock jumped from $12, $13 to $22 in the last week because of the auction stuff and the perception that it's going to be big money. And it may be. But I will note that $22.30, I think is what it closed at on Friday, is still a bit less than the $24 the stock debuted at 3 years ago in 2022, with all that debt and all that promise of, oh, we're going to be a new media company with all kinds of big shoulders and doing cool stuff, except that's not how it's been under David Zaslav. And now he's on to the next stage of his recombinations.
Was it 6 or 7 box office smashes in a row? Stringing them together, David.
James Gunn, who directed Superman, is working on Man of Tomorrow. He said they will begin production in April. So that was a good bit of news for the fans. I have raised the question, is a $615 million worldwide gross really hit when you spend $225 million to make it and another $125 million to market it, and you have to split your worldwide gross roughly in half? And I would say that's $50 million underwater. That's just me. I'm a journalist because I can't add. But anyway, you guys.
You lost me on French cinema, but I will try to indulge you on a cinema conversation. House of Dynamite on Netflix. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it yet. I heard it's explosive. I know it's essentially an update of a couple of classic, end of the world scenarios with nuclear weapons. So, and Rebecca Ferguson is epically awesome, like she always is.
It was good. That's all I'll say about
it. It's also Catherine Bigelow, Jim Cameron's ex, who did Hurt Locker and a bunch of other great stuff, and is a fantastic director and a very tall director. She's 6 feet tall.
I thought Zero Dark 30 is a underrated movie. It was acclaimed, but it can't achieve enough complaint for my liking.
She has made a string of really good, gut-wrenching, based in real-world military or other conflict kinds of pieces. Anything she does is probably going to be pretty damn good, to use the official term.
It's like, I don't know, it's a lot of Netflix stuff. It's like, it's flawed, and it's not satisfying in any stretch, but it moves along, and it's cleverly, the narrative's clever. It's like interlocking stories that relate to each other, told kind of synchronistic.
We should if we had the licensing in place, we could do, like, speaking of old MTV hits, REM's "It's the End of the World as We Know It," and I feel fine. So, but we can't. But we can refer to it, and you guys can find the video not on MTV but on YouTube. So
finally, Chad Powers on Hulu. Seen it?
No, I'm not going to see that.
Okay, we might have to cut this whole thing. It's worth it.
Last little bit. Yeah, we can cut that.
It's surprising. It was surprisingly good.
Okay, Glenn Powell's good, but I just can't get excited about that when I got 40 other things coming out that are pretty great.
Here we go. Take us out, David.
With that, we should wrap this up. I am David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT, and this very podcast, Next TMT Talks, here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, talking all things telecom, media, and technology, also the other way around with those T and MT. And you can subscribe to us for free at nexttmt.com and follow us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and hear all our stuff for free. Love our advertisers and sponsors, and love us, and keep coming back. We love having you guys listen in and send comments and all the rest.
I should say love Looper Insights. They sponsored this week's issue.
Thank you, Looper Insights, for your insights and your support. Much appreciated. And with that, we are out of here.